September 15th, 1940. Battle of Britain Day. The time is 11:47 a.m. The location is 23,000 feet above the sprawling patchwork quilt of Kent, England. The air up here is thin, screamingly cold, and deceptively beautiful. To a casual observer lying in the grass of the weald below, the sky is a pristine canvas of azure, marked only by the lazy chalk-white scratches of vapor trails. It looks like a game, a silent, distant ballet. But inside the cockpit of a Hawker Hurricane, there is no silence. There is no beauty. There is only a claustrophobic, vibrating cage of noise, oil, and terror. Squadron leader Douglas Bader, a man who has already given his legs to aviation and replaced them with tin and determination, is fighting for his life. The roar of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine is not a sound. It is a physical assault, a 12-cylinder scream that rattles the teeth and vibrates the very marrow of the bones. Bader banks his machine hard to the left. He hauls back on the spade grip of the control column. The G-force hits him instantly, an invisible hand crushing his chest, forcing the air from his lungs, draining the blood from his head down into his boots. His vision grays at the edges, turning the world into a tunnel. He is banking because he knows the predators are there. The Messerschmitt Bf 109s. They are sleek, shark-like, and lethal. They dive from the sun, their Daimler-Benz engines howling, hunting the slower, sturdier British Hurricanes. Bader knows they are there, but he cannot see them. Sound FX. Sudden, tearing rip of cannon fire. The sound of metal screaming. Tracer rounds, bright, magnesium-white lines of fire, slice through the empty air where his cockpit occupied space precisely 1 second earlier. The air itself seems to shatter. The rounds pass so close he can smell the ozone and the burning cordite. The Bf-19 that fired them pulls up, a gray blur against the blue, having missed by inches. It had been sitting directly behind Bader. It had killed 2 of his pilots earlier that morning. It had approached unseen, lined up its shot, and fired. Bader survives only by the instinct of a veteran, a twitch of the hand, a random jink to the left. But instinct is a finite resource, and luck is running out. This is the defining horror of the Battle of Britain. It is a war fought in 3 dimensions, but for the men of RAF Fighter Command, the most critical dimension, the cone of space directly behind their heads, is a void, a black hole. The mathematics of this conflict are brutal. They are unyielding. In the first 4 months of this struggle for air superiority, the Royal Air Force has hemorrhaged aircraft. The ledger of loss is written in fire and twisted duralumin. RAF Fighter Command has lost 1,547 aircraft. German fighters account for 792 of those kills. But the most chilling statistic, the number that keeps Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding awake in the subterranean bunker at Bentley Priory, is the percentage of surprise attacks. In 73% of cases, the British pilot never sees his attacker before the first rounds hit. They are dying blind. The Hawker Hurricane is a magnificent machine. It is a stable gun platform, capable of absorbing punishment that would disintegrate a Spitfire. It can turn tighter than the German 109. British pilots know this. If they can drag the German into a turning fight, a dogfight, they can win. But you cannot dodge what you cannot see. You cannot outturn a ghost. The Hurricane possesses a fatal flaw. It is a flaw born of the desire to protect the pilot. Behind the pilot's head sits a heavy slab of armored steel, designed to stop bullets from a frontal attack. It is a shield, but it is also a blinder. This headrest creates a massive blind spot, extending 45 degrees to either side of dead stern. It blocks the view. It hides the enemy. To check their 6 o'clock, the kill position, pilots are forced to unstrap their harnesses mid-flight. They twist their bodies in the cramped, freezing cockpits until their vertebrae crack. They crane their necks like owls, straining against the G-forces, eyes watering, scanning the blinding sun and the gray clouds, desperate to spot the enemy clawing for altitude behind them. By October 1940, the statistics have solidified into a grim actuarial table. The average combat life expectancy of a Hurricane pilot is 87 hours of flight time, 4 weeks. That's all the time a young man has. From his first sortie, his first taste of combat, to his last terrified moment of fire and darkness. 87 hours to learn, to fight, and to die. What none of them know, not Bader, twisting in his seat, not doubting, staring at the map table, not the Luftwaffe aces marking their kill rings, is that the solution to this slaughter is not in a high-tech laboratory. It is not in a wind tunnel. It is in the mind of a 34-year-old engineer with no university degree. It is waiting in a workshop full of fabric scraps and glue. It will cost 11 shillings, and it will change the war. Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough, Hampshire. August 1940. While the skies over Kent are a killing ground, the atmosphere in the conference room at Farnborough is one of sterile, suffocating calm. The room smells of chalk dust, stale tobacco smoke, and the heavy damp scent of wool uniforms. This is the brain trust of the British Empire. The room is filled with Britain's finest aeronautical minds, men with doctorates, knighthoods, and decades of experience in the physics of flight. These are the men who understand drag coefficients, Reynolds numbers, and structural loads. But today, their science is failing them. Air Vice Marshal Trafford. Lee Mallory stands before a large blackboard. He holds a wooden pointer like a weapon. The board is covered in diagrams and columns of numbers. The numbers tell a story of systematic slaughter. Gentlemen, Lee Mallory begins. His voice is clipped, aristocratic, but underneath the polish, there is a tremor of desperation. We are losing the visibility war. He taps the diagram of the Hurricane's fuselage. The sound echoes sharply in the silent room. Our pilots have a 90-degree blind cone directly astern. The Messerschmitt pilot knows this. He positions himself in that cone. He closes to 200 yards. He fires. Our man never knows he is there until 20mm cannon shells are tearing through his fuel tanks and setting the cockpit ablaze. The men around the table shift uncomfortably. They shuffle papers. They know the problem. It is the solution that eludes them. The proposed solutions fill 3 pages of memoranda lying on the oak table. It is a catalogue of failure. A representative from Hawker Aircraft, the manufacturer, clears his throat. We have looked into redesigning the canopy, he says. A bubble-style canopy, similar to what the Americans are experimenting with. It would offer 360-degree visibility. Timeline? Lee Mallory asks. To retool the production lines? To test the aerodynamics? To source the plexiglass? The engineer hesitates. 18 months, minimum, assuming no bombing raids on the factories. Lee Mallory turns away. 18 months. In 18 months, at current loss rates, the RAF will cease to exist. Hitler's invasion barges, massing in the French ports, will be landing on the beaches of Sussex. 18 months is a lifetime. It is 1,000 lifetimes. Next, Lee Mallory snaps. Mirrors, another engineer suggests. Automotive-style rear-view mirrors mounted on the canopy frame. Tried it, interjects Dr. William Farron of the Royal Aircraft Establishment. Wind tunnel tests are conclusive. External mirrors create parasitic drag. They create turbulence over the tail section. They reduce the Hurricane's top speed by 4 miles per hour. A silence falls. 4 miles per hour. In peacetime, it is negligible. In combat, 4 miles per hour is the difference between catching a Heinkel bomber before it drops its load on London and watching it fly away. It is the difference between escaping a Bf-109 and being run down and butchered. Speed is life. They cannot sacrifice speed. Dr. Frederick Linneman, Winston Churchill's personal scientific advisor, leans forward. He is a man of immense intellect and expensive tastes. What about technology? He asks. Rearward-facing cameras, wired to a display in the instrument panel. It is a brilliant idea. It is the future. But this is 1940. The technology doesn't exist, Doctor, says Sir Henry Tizard, chairman of the Aeronautical Research Committee. We can barely build enough radios. Televisual equipment small enough for a fighter? It's a fantasy. The cost would be astronomical, and the development time unknown. Squadron leader Peter Townsend is sitting in the corner. He is not a scientist. He is a pilot. He has recently recovered from wounds sustained in a dogfight he never saw coming. He stands up. He is young, handsome, and looks utterly exhausted. "With respect, gentlemen," Townsend says, "we are breaking our necks. I've seen men pull muscles so badly trying to check their six that they can't turn their heads for a week. We are twisting, straining, and still the 109s get through. We need to see behind us without turning around. It is as simple as that." Sir Henry Tizard sighs. He takes off his glasses and rubs the bridge of his nose. He deals in the art of the possible, and right now, physics is the enemy. "There is no simple solution, squadron leader," Tizard says, his voice heavy with the weight of his authority. "The Hurricane's design is fixed. We cannot move the headrest. It is armor plate, essential for pilot protection. If we remove it, you die from bullets in the back. If we keep it, you die from surprise. We cannot raise the pilot's seat. The cockpit geometry won't allow it. Your head would hit the canopy. We certainly cannot extend the canopy." He looks around the room. The best minds in Britain are defeated. "The expert consensus is unanimous," Tizard declares. "Improving rear visibility requires a fundamental airframe redesign. The Hurricane will have to fight with its blind spot. Pilots will simply have to be more vigilant." "More vigilant," Townsend repeats quietly to himself. "Tell that to the dead." The meeting adjourns with no actionable recommendations. The scientists pack their briefcases. They will go home to their dinners. The pilots will go back to their airfields, climb into their blind cockpits, and wait for the tracer fire they will never see. Brooklands Aircraft Factory, Surrey. The same day. While the titans of engineering argue in Farnborough, Frederick George Miles is walking through the chaotic, noisy floor of his factory. Frederick Miles does not look like the man who will save the RAF. At 34, he is an outsider. He is a self-taught engineer. He left school at 16 to work in his father's furniture workshop. He learned about structure not from textbooks, but from building chairs and tables. He learned about stress, about grain, about how materials move and breathe. He has no university degree. He has no formal aeronautics training. By all rights, he has no business designing modifications for His Majesty's fighters. What he does have is a small aircraft company, Miles Aircraft Ltd., which builds training planes. And he is something the men in Farnborough lack: a profound humility, and an obsessive habit of listening to the men who do the dying. Miles spends his lunch breaks in the factory canteen. He doesn't sit with the executives. He sits with the ferry pilots, the test pilots, the combat veterans rotating home. He drinks tea that tastes like metal and listens. Today, he's sitting across from a Hurricane pilot named James Nicholson. Nicholson looks 20 years older than his birth certificate. His hands tremble slightly as he holds his cigarette. He's describing a dogfight from 2 days ago. Nicholson will later receive the Victoria Cross for staying in his burning fighter to shoot down a German bomber. But right now, he is not a hero. He is a frightened young man. "I knew he was back there, Mr. Miles," Nicholson says, staring into the swirling brown liquid of his tea. "I could feel it. You know, the way you sense someone watching you in a dark room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up." Miles leans forward. "But you couldn't see him?" "Not a bloody thing," Nicholson says. "I couldn't confirm it without breaking formation and banking hard. And by the time I did turn, he'd already opened fire. Put a burst through my reserve tank. I was lucky. 2 inches to the left and I'd be mince." Miles nods slowly. His mind is racing. "What if you could see him without turning?" Nicholson laughs, a sharp, bitter sound. "Mirrors don't work. They vibrate so much you can't tell a 109 from a spot of oil on the glass." "Not mirrors," Miles says. His voice is distant. He's looking past Nicholson, looking at the air itself. "What if the air could tell you?" That evening, the factory floor goes quiet. The workers go home, but the lights in Miles's personal workshop stay on. He's surrounded by fabric samples, scraps of linen, and technical drawings. He's not thinking about drag coefficients or Reynolds numbers. He's thinking about a windstorm he watched last winter. He remembers standing by a fence. A piece of canvas had come loose. When the wind was steady, the canvas billowed, but stayed relatively still. But when the wind came over the roof of the shed, when it was turbulent, churning, and chaotic, the canvas snapped. It rippled. It vibrated violently. He realized then that the fabric was making the invisible visible. It was showing the shape of the wind. Aircraft move through the air like ships move through water. They leave a wake, a trail of disturbed, churning, turbulent air. A pursuing fighter, that deadly BF-109, cannot approach a hurricane without flying through the air the hurricane has just passed through, or pushing its own pressure wave ahead of it. If a German fighter is close behind, say within 200 yards, it disturbs the air over the hurricane's tail. Miles stands up. He grabs a roll of lightweight cotton fabric, the same cheap material used to cover the wings of training gliders. He takes a pair of shears and cuts a strip, 18 inches long, 3 inches wide. He moves to his workbench. He finds a spool of piano wire, high-tensile steel wire used for control cables. He bends it with pliers, fashioning a simple rectangular frame. He mounts the fabric strip to the wire frame with quick-release fasteners. He holds it up to the light. The concept is absurdly, laughably simple. Mount these fabric strips on the Hurricane's upper wing surface, just aft of the cockpit. Place them right where the pilot can see them in his peripheral vision, without turning his head. When the air is clean, when the sky behind is empty, the strips will flutter gently, smoothed by the laminar flow of the hurricane's own slipstream. But when a pursuing aircraft enters the kill zone, when that 109 disturbs the air, the turbulence will hit the strips. They will ripple. They will snap. They will create a chaotic visual pattern that the human eye is evolutionarily hardwired to detect. Movement in the periphery. The pilot won't need to turn around. He won't need complex electronics. He won't need a PhD in aerodynamics. He will see the fabric go mad, and his instinct will scream, "Break." Miles sketches the mounting configuration. The strips will attach to the wing's leading edge, angled slightly upward. He does the math in his head. Total weight, 4 ounces. Total cost, 11 shillings for materials and labor. He stares at his crude prototype lying on the workbench. It looks like a child's toy. It looks like a piece of laundry. He knows exactly what the Air Ministry will say. They will call it amateurish. They will call it dangerous. They will say it degrades the dignity of the Royal Air Force to fly into battle with rags taped to their wings. He picks up the prototype. It weighs nothing, yet it feels heavy in his hand. He decides to test it anyway. Brooklyn's Aerodrome. September 3rd, 1940. 6:15 a.m. The sun has not yet crested the horizon. The airfield is a landscape of grays and muted greens, shrouded in a low, clinging mist that dampens sound. The air smells of wet grass and high-octane aviation fuel. Frederick Miles arrives at the perimeter fence before dawn. He's carrying his fabric strips in a nondescript canvas tool bag. He looks less like an aeronautical engineer and more like a burglar. Parked on the tarmac, silent and brooding, is a Hurricane Mkekuwafori. Its camouflage paint is chipped and oil-stained, a testament to the relentless tempo of operations. This specific aircraft has been grounded for routine maintenance. Officially, it is unavailable for flight testing. Unofficially, it is Miles' only chance. Miles has convinced the maintenance crew chief, a grizzled man named Albert Simmons, to look the other way for 20 minutes. It is a conspiracy of necessity. "This is completely irregular, Mr. Miles," Simmons mutters, glancing nervously toward the officer's mess, where lights are just flicking on. His breath plumes in the chill air. "If the group captain finds out I let you modify a service aircraft without authorization, well, I'll be peeling potatoes in Scotland for the rest of the war." "Then we won't tell him," Miles replies, climbing onto the wing. He works quickly. His hands are steady, despite the cold. He positions the wire frames on the leading edge of the wing, just outboard of the propeller arc. He uses the spring clips he designed the night before. They snap into place with a satisfying click gripping the metal skin without damaging it. Installation takes 12 minutes. Miles steps back to admire his handiwork. The fabric strips flutter gently in the morning breeze. They look utterly ridiculous. Against the lethal industrial lines of the hurricane, they look like party streamers. They look like a joke. Test pilot George Bullman arrives a few minutes later, a steaming mug of coffee in his gloved hand. Bullman is a man who has flown everything from biplanes to experimental prototypes. He has seen it all. He stops dead in his tracks when he sees the wings. "What in God's name is that?" Bullman asks, pointing with his mug. "Visibility enhancement system," Miles says, wiping grease from his hands. "It looks like you've decorated a fighter with ladies' handkerchiefs," Bullman says flatly. "Will you fly it?" Bullman walks around the aircraft, examining the strips with the skeptical eye of a man whose life depends on the laws of physics. "The Air Ministry hasn't approved this, Fred," Bullman says. "This modification hasn't been wind tunnel tested. We have no data on how it affects handling characteristics at high speed. For all we know, those strips could tear off in a dive and foul the ailerons, or they could induce flutter in the wing structure and tear the spar apart. Or they could save lives," Miles counters. His voice is hard, lacking its usual deference. "That's not how we do things, George. I know. There are procedures, protocols, safety reviews. But while we follow procedures, pilots are dying. 87 hours, George. That's the average combat life expectancy right now. 87 hours. Bullman stares at the fabric strips, then at the determination burning in Miles's eyes. He takes a sip of coffee. "If something goes wrong up there, it's my license," Bullman says. "I know," Miles replies. "And if this works, you're taking full credit." Bullman snorts. "I'm not having my name attached to something that looks this bloody ridiculous." "Deal." Bullman climbs into the cockpit. He straps in, adjusting his goggles. The ground crew clears the area. Sound FX. The starter cartridge fires with a loud hiss, followed by the coughing roar of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine coming to life. Miles watches from the flight line, his heart hammering against his ribs, as the Hurricane taxis to the runway. The propeller washes the grass flat. The aircraft turns into the wind. The throttle goes forward. The tail lifts. The wheels leave the ground. As the plane accelerates, the fabric strips flutter violently in the slipstream. Miles holds his breath. Will they rip off? Will they destabilize the airflow? They hold. For 20 minutes, Bullman puts the Hurricane through its paces. He climbs to 10,000 feet. He dives. He banks hard, pulling G's that would black out a lesser man. Miles watches the speck in the sky, waiting for disaster, waiting for the wing to buckle. It doesn't. When Bullman lands and taxis back, the engine cuts out. The propeller spins to a halt, ticking as it cools. Bullman sits in the cockpit for a long moment, motionless. Miles walks up to the wing, dread pooling in his stomach. "Well?" he asks. Bullman pulls off his leather flight helmet. He looks at the strips, then down at Miles. His face is unreadable. "They work," Bullman says quietly. Miles lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Truly?" "I had Simmons chase me in the Miles Master Trainer," Bullman explains, climbing down. "Every time he closed to within 400 yards, the strips went mad. Different patterns, Fred. Flutter from directly astern. A ripple from the quarter. I could tell where he was without looking. It was obvious." "So, we show this to the Air Ministry," Miles says, relief washing over him. Bullman laughs, a bitter, cynical sound. "You show this to the Air Ministry, they'll have you committed. This violates every principle of clean aerodynamic design. It's fabric tape, stuck to a fighter aircraft, with spring clips. Senior engineers will call it amateurish. They will call it dangerous. They will never approve it, through normal channels." "Then what do we do?" Bullman wipes oil from his face. "We bypass them. We go straight to the top. We go to someone who cares more about dead pilots than proper procedure. Fighter Command Headquarters, Bentley Priory, September 10th, 1940, 2:30 p.m. The underground bunker at Bentley Priory is the nerve center of the war, a place of dim lights and hushed voices moving WAF plotters across giant maps. But today, the battle is being fought in a well-lit conference room upstairs. The room is filled with hostile faces. Air Vice Marshal Mallory has assembled the same experts who declared the visibility problem unsolvable 3 weeks earlier. Now, they are being told that a furniture maker's son, with a bag of fabric strips, has found a solution they missed. The professional jealousy in the room is palpable. It is thick enough to choke on. Miles stands at the front of the room. He has his crude prototype mounted on a demonstration board. He feels small in this room of decorated officers and renowned scientists. His suit is cheap. Their uniforms are tailored. Joseph Smith, the man who succeeded the legendary R.J. Mitchell at Supermarine, examines the strips with barely concealed contempt. "This is your solution?" Smith asks, holding up a strip of cotton between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a soiled tissue. "Fabric tape?" "Fabric strips mounted on spring clips," Miles corrects him, keeping his voice steady. "They detect disturbances in the airflow caused by pursuing aircraft and provide visual warning to the pilot." "Aerodynamically impossible," declares Dr. William Farron from the Royal Aircraft Establishment. He doesn't even look at the prototype. He looks at his notes. The hurricane's own slipstream would cause constant flutter. The pilot would be seeing false warnings continuously. This would be worse than useless. It would be actively distracting. A pilot distracted is a pilot dead. "Test data shows otherwise," Miles replies. He distributes copies of Bullman's flight report. In 17 simulated attack approaches, the strips provided accurate warning in 17 cases, 0 false positives. The laminar flow over the wing keeps them stable until the wake hits. The room erupts. "Unauthorized testing on a service aircraft," a group captain shouts from the back. "Where's the wind tunnel data?" "What about structural loading at high speed?" "This violates Air Ministry specification, F-30-34. Sir Henry Tizard stands up. The room quiets instantly. Tizard is the gatekeeper. "Mr. Miles," Tizard says, his voice condescendingly patient, "I appreciate your enthusiasm. We all want to save lives. But we cannot modify frontline fighters based on one unauthorized test flight. These strips could tear off and cause catastrophic damage. They could affect handling characteristics and combat conditions. We need months of evaluation. We need to run full trials at Boscombe Down." Miles feels the heat rising in his neck. He thinks of Nicholson's shaking hands. He thinks of the telegrams being delivered to mothers across London. "How many pilots died while you were discussing testing protocols?" Miles interrupts. The room goes deathly silent. "You do not interrupt, Sir Henry Tizard." "Excuse me?" Tizard says, his face hardening. "Yesterday, we lost 14 hurricanes." Miles continues, his voice shaking with anger. "Last week, 41. The Luftwaffe is killing our pilots because they can't see their attackers. I am offering a solution that costs 11 shillings per aircraft and takes 20 minutes to install. You talk about months of evaluation? We don't have months. We might not have weeks." "That's quite enough," Tizard says coldly. "This meeting is over. You will remove those devices from any aircraft you have touched, and you will consider yourself lucky not to be prosecuted for interfering with Crown property." Miles stands there, defeated. The wall of no is too high. "Show me." The voice comes from the back of the room. It is quiet, authoritative, and instantly commands obedience. Every head turns.